Hi, my name is Gordon West. I'm a graduate student in second language acquisition and a member of the AAAL Graduate Student Council on the social media subcommittee. I'm here today with two graduate students who have done important and groundbreaking work in public scholarship around race and language, Mike Mena and JPB Gerald. Mike is the host of the YouTube channel, The Social Life of Language, Theorizing Language and Critical Race Theory, which he started in 2017. Mike, would you like to briefly introduce yourself and your channel?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is Mike from the Social Life of Language YouTube channel, bringing to you videos on language, race, social theory more generally. I try to present nuance in a way that is quick-paced and entertaining. Everything your ancient Harvard professor does not do. I don't know if I can say that. That's the third time I ended my career this week, by the way. But yeah, that's what I do. That's what I do. A YouTube channel. I try to be fun. That's why I'm here. I'm trying to be fun.
Awesome, thank you. And JPB is the host of the podcast Unstandardized English, a podcast working against white epistemology and racial-linguistic ideologies, which he started in 2019, and it's currently in its third season. JPB, do you want to briefly introduce yourself and your podcast?
Sure, thanks. So I'm a doc candidate at Community Hunter College, and I just started having a lot of thoughts after about a year in school, and like all things, I listened to my wife, and she said, Justin, basically she said, you need to tell people who aren't me these things. And so I started trying to tell other people these things, and that's how it came about. I don't always stay focused on those things in the subheading, but that's just because I don't focus very well. And yeah, most recently had an episode about grad school gatekeeping and some of the ways that people are kept out artificially, which also segued into sociological research about vaccine mandates and stuff like that, because that's just how the conversation went. So it just sort of goes where the conversation takes me, and I enjoy doing it, and I hope people enjoy listening to it.
Awesome, thank you. So thank you both for being here. Today, we're talking about public scholarship and alternative ways of sharing your research and what we as graduate students can do to share our work in ways that go sort of beyond the traditional academic pathways. So the first question I have is, Mike, how did you begin your work on your YouTube channel? What drove you to that venue?
Yeah, right. So basically, I started my YouTube channel in response to what I thought were just disastrous lectures on YouTube from various Ivy League institutions, just super bad videos. I felt they were super boring. I wasn't connecting with them. I was having trouble understanding this stuff in class, only to go to YouTube and try to, get some help basically. And I didn't understand those YouTube videos either. So, basically what I wanted to do is I wanted to make lectures fun. So I wrote out a lecture on Foucault. I bought a $20 webcam and I pressed record. And that was like 5 or 6 years ago or something. And I was really drawn to the visual aspect of YouTube. Not to reify the visual phenotypical markers of race too much, but I wanted to watch somebody that was not a 95-year-old, white dude that was talking super monotone. I wanted to see somebody, not that looked like me, but somebody that I could connect with on some level. And I just couldn't connect with these Ivy League professors that, had a camera way in the back of a room and you couldn't ever hear the questions people were asking, things like that. So, you got to understand, I was a high school teacher for a lot of years. I remain a high school teacher in my heart. So to me, if no one is learning, then no one is teaching either. So I did not get anything from those YouTube videos. So I just really thought, hey, let me see what I can make. And, if people like it, cool. If not, I tried. And people seem to like it. And it started subscribing to me, and that's how everything started. It just started with 10 subscribers, then 20, 30, 100. Now it's like 4,000 or something like that. But yeah, it's a very simple decision. I just wanted to try it. I pressed record, and that was it.
JPB, how did you start your podcast? What drove you to podcasting as a venue?
Yeah. So as I sort of mentioned, with my wife's advice, to start, but her advice wasn't podcast. Her advice was to do something, right? And I haven't really articulated this so much on the show, but one of the things that sort of has connected me with it is that what is really the way that most academics get their work heard, right? Even, I'm not just talking about journals because nobody reads them, but there's conferences, right? So you go to a conference and maybe 30 people go to your room, and that's like it's like you did a big thing when 30 people go in there. And I said, okay, and this is before the pandemic, obviously, I could do that, but I got to wait around all year for another opportunity to be seen by 20 people. No. And it's not like I get that. I don't have 4,000 listeners or anything like that. But I said, if I just sort of want to test my ideas out on the crucible of the academics I respect, and I'm not saying they all listen to me, but, if I'm putting out just trash ideas, I feel like people are going to tell me. And so I really wanted to sort of test my ideas out. Because they're not all my ideas. Sometimes they're interviews, sometimes they're conversations, sometimes they really are just my ideas. And that's why I thought it was a useful way to do it. The audio aspect specifically is sort of similar to what Mike is saying, because, and I was talking to the women who host the Vocal Fries about this. And I have, for a very long time, not been comfortable in my voice. I mean, that is a cliche statement, but I mean it literally. Not only is it not particularly low pitched, right? And on top of that, not to reify the way that different races are supposed to sound, but I don't sound the way that people stereotypically expect Black men to sound, right? So there was someone who told me they listened to my podcast and they thought it was a little sus because they didn't think I was Black until I said I was. And then they're like, oh man, I really like it. I'm like, okay, well, maybe you should think about that. But I wanted to do that differently. And similarly, what Mike is saying, most podcast hosts are white guys. And I wanted that not to be the case. But also with my particular voice, and I mean literally my voice, I thought that there was a place for it.
I guess to keep going with that, JPB, what have you gained from the experience now? You've been doing it for a few years, so you've had interactions with your audience members and people listening to the show. Can you talk a little bit more about sort of what you've gained over the years of doing this?
Well, not only have I gotten better at it, because at the beginning, I was just trying some things out. I was like using my phone. I just want to say stuff. Let's just see what happens. I was trying out different things with audio and all that. But that's obvious. Anybody who does a show for a while, you're gonna get better at it. Fine. But one thing, especially that I have learned from doing it, is that I'm just so much better able to tease out ideas in these conversations over an hour and 10 minutes or whatever it is than I can in whatever many months it takes to put a finished article together. And that doesn't mean that there's no value in it. I still write articles, but I have been able to crystallize my thoughts so much better in this medium than I have in some of the other things. And my writing is so much better after spending this time talking out these ideas, because the fact of the matter is, again, even regardless of the pandemic, which is it's not a thing you can say regardless, but I mean, it started before that. I don't have as much of an opportunity to just think about things with someone else, right? From a slightly, because the people in my cohort, and it's not a criticism of them, we just have different interests from one another. So I wasn't really able to just really tease out all my thoughts with them. And I didn't have a dissertation committee at the beginning. I mean, now I do, but at the time I didn't. So really pulling ideas apart was something that I have only been able to do because of this. And now I feel so much more confident in pulling ideas together. And that doesn't mean I think I'm always right. It just means that I can follow an argument a lot better than I could 2 years ago.
Mike, do you want to talk a little bit about what you've gained? You've been doing this for 4 years now?
Yeah, 4, 5, maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5, something like that. If I imagine my audience to be high school students and my mom, and I'm trying to, quote unquote, translate academic material for them, I learned that everybody can understand that linguistic register. So I could speak exactly like that to a room full of PhDs from a totally different discipline, and they're going to understand it, and they won't feel as though I'm being condescending toward them. That practice of taking academic texts and then moving it into everyday language just really let me understand things to a level that I had never understood before. Because it takes a lot of work to move that knowledge into like everyday talk so that people don't just like click away from my channel within the first 30 seconds, like, oh, this is too hard. This is too boring. This is too, whatever. I'm not going to connect with this. I don't understand it in class. Why am I going to understand it in this YouTube video the way I felt? But I think what I've really learned, or the central idea that I've learned is that no matter how difficult or theoretical a concept is, it can be put into everyday language. So the idea that like, oh, there's no way I can explain, such and such theory without referring to such and such theory. I don't buy it. It's possible. I do it every single video, So I think that's the most valuable lesson that I've learned, that, what, everybody can understand anything if it's just worded or reworded the right way, or translated, or I like to say I transpose, because when you start saying translating, you ultimately start thinking like, oh, things are going to be lost in translation, right? I think of it more of like changing the key of a song. Everything is there, it's just a different key. You don't have to dumb things down. You don't have to literally simplify it, but you can present things in a simple way that everybody can understand, everybody can connect to. So, I mean, that is the most valuable lesson that I have learned so far.
Yeah, that's a really good lesson. That's definitely not one of the main lessons that you really take away from grad school. I think that's not something you learn in a lot of classes here, right?
Right. A lot of times we're trying to get up to that level of like, oh, I need to talk like these people in my classroom because that's the only way that I'll be seen as legitimate, or whatever. Because in a lot of times that is true. I sat in a lot of classrooms, never saying a word because I didn't know how to use phrases like the ways in which, blah 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 blah. To me, I was just like, why don't you just say the way something happens, or the ways, or how something happens? Why do you have to say the ways in which like every other phrase? I didn't want to sound like that. And I don't know, like the Mexican cultural side of me just kind of just hears that and just being like, dude, you're not that smart. Or to rephrase that, I think I'm as smart as you, I just don't sound like you. Which was, it took me a couple of years to actually accept that as true, but that was just part of my journey,
So what's interesting is that I think about one of Mike's videos on imposter syndrome, which Mike can explain if you would like to give more detail on it. But him going over, and of course this eventually became an article and all that, but just before the article, and I'm talking about the YouTube channel anyway, is the article really calling into question the way we sort of accept imposter syndrome as a regular, real thing, right? And people listening to be like, wait, it's not real? That's not what I said. What I mean is we accept it as just a reality of like, well, when people from a marginalized background enter a space that's, led by dominant groups or whatever it is, then they feel that they don't belong. But the fact is, like, these spaces were not made for us. In fact, not only were they not made for us, they were made for other people to exclude us. So in that sense, we are literally imposters in that sense. There's nothing wrong with the way we feel. We feel correctly that we have been excluded historically and currently, right? So in being there, we are meant to feel not correct. I say all of that with regard to our podcast and the YouTube channel, but like for me, with my podcast, I get much more direct, emotional, and open responses from people than I think that I ever would get from sounding like everybody else, right? And there are people who are genuinely, not that many, but there are people who are genuinely fans of the work that I do, right? And I don't just mean that they cite the articles, because I have articles and people cite them, I guess, but that's not nearly as gratifying to me as like someone telling me this episode really spoke to me because it reminds me of whatever somebody says about it, right? Like that to me is much more important than what my H index or whatever says, right? I don't know. It's like a quarterback rating in football. I don't know how to calculate that, but I know I can calculate when someone tells me how much an episode meant to them. And similar to what Mike was saying about sounding like people, I had this image of doctoral program. I'm going to go into these like parties or gatherings. Everyone's going to just be like, this person 1990 and this person 1984 and this person 2000. I'm like, I can't do that. Right. And I went to quote unquote, top schools and all this, and I still can't talk like that, or I can't do it authentically. I can pretend. But in having, people I really respect who are, really pushing the boundaries of scholarship, respond positively to the work that I'm doing, it has also allowed my writing to get better in that my writing retains my voice, and you can tell it's the same person in the podcast as in the articles. And I think that that's important because sometimes you will see people and they'll write an article and then I get them on a podcast and they sound totally different. I'm just like, wait, what? Who is this person? I'm trying to align the two things, like it's just different parts of the same person, because I think sometimes that can be a problem, because if you are looking to apply to or join or progress through grad school and the only image you're presented is the dry person in the article, and then you don't know that they might sound different on a podcast or on a YouTube channel, I think that does a disservice, because I think it's part of the harmful nature of an imposter syndrome, that these aren't real people.
I like how you've talked about the value of what you're doing. And I think my experience coming through grad school has been a lot different than I thought coming in. Like the value of your work, like you said, is judged mainly through like H-index or citations or how many articles you're publishing. And so value becomes very narrowly defined in those kind of like neoliberal terms in the university structure. And so doing something like this sort of public scholarship, having a podcast, YouTube channel, that goes definitely beyond that. And I know that's something that a lot of graduate students, they might be kind of like interested or drawn towards that type of work, but maybe they feel a little bit like concerned about those other metrics that they're going to be judged or evaluated by. And so I wonder if you have any advice or what you think other graduate students should know about doing this type of work or engaging with public scholarship the way that you have.
I mean, I actually been working on a chapter called Escaping the H-index. But because it's just like, once you create these metrics and everyone's tied to them, then, first of all, if it's a false meritocracy, basically, right? Not that meritocracy really exists, but I'm saying let's just pretend it does, and this doesn't even qualify as it. Because it's not like you can say, if you get a 10, and I'm just making up numbers, if you reach number 10, then you get this job. It doesn't work that way. There's too many people. So what's the point? So like you can't make yourself into a numerically perfect candidate for whatever it is you're trying to do, because it doesn't exist and it's too many people. So it's better that you go after what really interests you, because you have a much higher chance of someone noticing you, if that's what you're looking for. And everyone's looking for different things. But if you're at some point, unless you are independently wealthy, someone's going to have to look down upon you and be open to whatever it is you're doing. And they have a much higher chance of noticing you because of some interesting thing you did, whether it's a podcast or a talk or a YouTube or whatever it is, than, because you hit 11.5 or 13.3. Right? If there's one article that really shoots up the list, yeah, sure. But I wouldn't say it's even the article. I'd say it's whatever you can do with the article, right? Is it the article becomes a talk, it becomes a certain, whatever it is. The more unusual successful thing is that, a publisher came to me and asked me if I wanted to write for them. And it was because of some talking I did. Now, the talking happened because I had done some writing, but it's like all these things are connected, So it's not, don't worry about the H index or whatever. It's like, as much as I prefer it to go away, it's not going to anytime soon. It's that these things can really be complementary.
I'll definitely follow up on that, because right now I've been complaining about it very loudly on Twitter about having to rewrite my CV that I basically neglected the entire pandemic, right? And I didn't realize I've done a lot of stuff this last year, or this last year and a half or whatever, but quantifying public engagement onto a CV is very tricky, because you're supposed to present public engagement or whatever in a way that is valuable to institutions. And how am I supposed to say, like, oh man, I got 4,000 subscribers. That's actually pretty good on YouTube, in the YouTube world. Like, nobody cares. I care, but I'm pretty sure institutions do not care. They don't care, like, oh, I have like 500,000 hours worth of watch time. Nobody cares. But how do I turn that into a metric that is recognizable to institutions is very tricky. And I think at some point, there's going to be a time where you have to somehow turn that into something that's recognized as legitimate to an institution, which is, I don't want it to sound like a warning, but it's something that perhaps when someone is engaging in media making, maybe in the back of your mind, kind of be thinking like, okay, how am I going to turn this into something that could be useful for me career-wise or whatever, if indeed you're interested in continuing in the world of academia, which is the next point, is you don't have to stay in this thing called academia. If media making brings you joy and you like being a public educator, there are other things you can do. You don't have to be a professor. It's nice though, especially if you're from a marginalized community, racialized community, like, it's important that we show up there too. But then there's that part of me in the back of my head was just like, who cares? Are we even going to be legitimate there, even when we are there? What are the barriers that we're going to run up against when we get to that point? But I think the advice I would give to somebody that wants to engage in content creation, educational content creation, whether it's from your field and you want to do it super seriously, or you want to do it just for fun, it's a very long journey and it's very slow. But don't start tomorrow because you're just going to keep putting it off. Just start today, press record and make something. It's not going to be great at the beginning, but just make something. And if you're having trouble with something in academia and you want to talk about it, I guarantee you there's somebody else having trouble with that exact same problem in academia too. And it's unfortunate, but a lot of times the academy is just, it's very competitive and you feel it in the classroom where you feel that pressure to sound smart. And you know what? Maybe that classroom is not where you shine. Maybe it's a YouTube channel. Maybe it's a podcast. Maybe it's in front of your friends, whatever. That kind of knowledge production is also legitimate, but it takes a lot of people doing it to make it legitimate. Right now, it's still new. We had the pandemic, so we have a lot of interest in digital media creation right now, and hopefully it keeps going. Hopefully the interest stays alive. But for me, what keeps it going is just keeping my family in mind. This channel is to help them understand stuff, keeping my friends in mind, keeping my former high school students in mind. They should be able to understand what I'm doing too. So yes, my audience is the academy. There's people in the academy that watch my stuff, but also my audience in the back of my head is always my mom. Like she is my audience. My mom, my high school students. So yeah, good luck, but just press record, try something and just do it. Do it today. Don't wait till tomorrow. Just press record.
Thank you both so much for sharing your time with us. Please check out the links below to Mike's channel, The Social Life of Language, and JPB's podcast, Unstandardized English, and learn more about their work. Go and check it out. All right. Thanks everyone for watching.